the diversity of the sector in terms of representation of society, and naturally in any, if we don't have a full representation of the people that we're serving, it is much, much harder to make sure that we serve all of them. I would say that we are responding to the analytical tools that the government puts in place through the Treasury Green Book when we appraise schemes and we identify schemes. And naturally, there is therefore a bit of a steer based on what the government wants in terms of modally specific routes. We've got, the funding is modally specific. We can only follow where the funding is, which is why, for me, flexibility of funding is such a critical part of allowing us to plan based on the data, based on the challenges that we face in the region, so that we can target our funding to allow us to achieve what we need to, based on what we know about our region.
Quick short follow-up from Neil Middleton. Can it be made available to wider stakeholders, brackets like us rail campaigners?
I will talk to Neil Middleton separately. The answer to that is often yes. We have, depending on the kind of purpose of it, we like to make sure our data is available for a limited time and with agreement on the purpose, so we can talk about that on a case-by-case basis.
Quite a question from Caroline Whitney. Where are you, Caroline? Out there somewhere. She says, it's important that transport is accessible. How are you engaging with transport providers like community transport to ensure there is an integrated offer? Richard.
So, obviously, we want to make transport systems as accessible as possible to everybody. I mean, there's no point in having transport that's inaccessible. We continue to support initiatives to provide, for example, disabled access at railway stations, where there are major funding constraints, but it's really sad, certainly on the Midland Main Line and the East Coast Main Line, that there are still many stations in our region where there's not step-free access. So, that's absolutely appalling at this time. So, we need more funding to sort that out. We also need to look very carefully at how public transport is accessible, and also even those small projects, ensuring that we have as many the dropped curbs, for example, with the appropriate surfaces to indicate where there are safe crossing points. So it's not just big initiatives, it's getting those small initiatives right, working with our local authorities to try and secure as much funding as possible.
Okay, Naomi.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think when we were developing the transport strategy, we created an influencers group to ensure that as many people were represented as possible in shaping the transport strategy. I think, and we worked closely with DfT at the time on that. I think it's fair to say that as we move into operation, it tends to then be devolved to the actual infrastructure providers or service providers. And it's a fair challenge, and any steer on what we can do to help there, absolutely, because I think it's a really important area that we need to work with.
John Sharp says, thinking about strategic bus routes, sadly, there's a total lack of collaboration between adjacent local authorities now. Any ways that you can adjust that?
I did mention in my opening remarks about the disappointment of many of our local authorities at the distribution of the BSIP funding. We've lobbied to see if that can be corrected. There's obviously only a limited pot of funding, but it's frankly not good enough that the funding is all focused on urban areas, because it's the rural areas that need that transport to feed into the urban areas. So a piecemeal approach is almost certainly doomed to failure. So our DfT representatives, who I know are in the audience, I know we've already made the plea to you privately, but once again, we have to revisit that even within limited funding envelopes. Naomi?
Thank you very much. One of the things, so Richard is absolutely right. We need to do this. We need funding, and the level of funding available to buses is very piecemeal, as Richard has said. One of the things that DfT has done is provided us with a small amount of funding to coordinate, to set up a coordination across our local authority partners on what we can do better. And that work is now underway. We published the first phase of the regional bus study 2 or 3 months ago, and there is now a forum across the partnership, and we are actively looking at how we can better support cross authority boundaries. Of course, there is a challenge that the nature of the buses sector makes it quite hard to manage those relationships, but we are doing what we can, and actually it was our local authorities that asked us to come together. It wasn't something that came from us or DFT. It was the local authorities that said, we need to work together, you need to help us do it.
Okay. We're told we've got a few more minutes left, so I'm just going to tackle a couple more questions before we wrap up. I mean, the pace of change in technology you mentioned, and there's a whole load of new technology, whether it's e-scooters, whether it's more e-active travel. There's a question here: if new transports, let's move there. If new transports, let me just. There we go. How does the EEH engage with the younger generation to hear their voice for their future transport needs? I suppose, bearing in mind that the technology is really accelerating in leaps and bounds. Richard, Naomi.
Well, from a technical perspective, again, it's a very good point, and it's not just the young generation; it's for all sectors that it's important that we engage with. We, during the development of the transport strategy, we did some engagement with some of our local authority youth forums, and they were really, really fascinating insights into the perspectives of young people. I went in all excited about the need to plan for a net zero sector, and a young person said to me, hold on, why are you telling me I can't drive? That's just, I have that right, you've had that right all your life, why should I not? And it really, really brought back to me that actually they want choice, and we need to respond to that. So I think, yes, we have done some of that in the development of the transport strategy. A little pushback would be that those people who are working on innovations and ideas can help us with this. They work with those people, they have access to those communities. Working with us and telling us what we could do more of is really important. And I will say there's loads on innovation this afternoon. As Councillor Wenham said, Councillor Darlington is the EEH Board Chair on Innovation. She's doing lots of fantastic work, and hopefully you'll be able to hear about it this afternoon.
Okay. Just to finally wrap up, just referring to the poll results there, clearly clarity of funding is really important to the audience here. There's a question here: what role can EEH have in identifying non-treasury funding and financing? There seems to be a reliance on central government funds and regulatory levies. Richard, any thoughts about that?
I think I did touch on that, in fact, in answer to the first question, that we have to look at all available pots of funding. I mean, clearly, major projects like East West Rail or the A428 rely rightly on central government funding. They're nationally important infrastructure projects. But then we come down to the role that local authority funding plays, and also the role that developers must play in ensuring that particularly those smaller projects inside the local authority network get funded. Not only the physical infrastructure, but how we provide, at least initially, subsidised local authority transport, bus transport, etc., to get bus routes established. So there's an important route there. And also to introduce innovation into connection of new housing, for example, to key transport nodes, such as railway stations and bus hubs and so on.
Okay.
And there's a big opportunity there for innovative transport. We look at things like the pods in Milton Keynes. But there is also a challenge with innovation, and that's the speed at which you can move from a particular demonstration project to actually wide-scale, at-scale rollout. And that's a very big mountain to climb. So we can see lots of innovation going on, but to then bake that into the mainstream as a hugely reliable, mass-rolled-out technology, there's a big step to do that, and people underestimate the time and investment that's needed to achieve that.
Thank you very much, and thanks Naomi and Richard for setting the scene for us and kicking us off there. Round of applause. Thank you very much to these two. Loads of time across the day for you to pin them down in the coffee breaks to make sure you get the answers to the questions that you really want to hear. But right now we're going to have to move on and hear some really interesting stuff about the rest of what's going on there. So thank you very much indeed. Right, we will move on now. As I say, do now go back to the Slido poll, and based upon what you've heard there, give us a few more words about what you think should be your takeaways from the day, or what sort of words that you should leave ringing in the ears of Richard and Naomi. Do get stuck in, and also do keep firing in your questions. I can just about see them, and they do move around a lot on my screen, so apologies if I missed them. But I will try and get to them all throughout the day as much as humanly possible. So thank you very much. Right, we're going to now hear from the owners of some of Heartland's its major infrastructure assets, both existing and those that are planned. So let's kick off and welcome to the stage Richard Leonard from National Highways, Beth West from East West Rail, and John Fox from Great... Yes?
Should we just get Richard up, do them sequentially, and then bring them on for the Q&A?
Yes, we can do that as well, yes. We're going to change the plan. We're going to just do them sequentially. Okay, fine. All right. That's Paul, buddy. He's in charge. Let me just, I'll therefore introduce to you Richard Leonard from National Highways. Richard, you're going to set the scene. Tell us what's going on with National Highways, where are we in the area, and what's going to happen next. So,
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, very good morning to you all. My name's Richard Leonard from National Highways. I'm the Head of Network Development, and delighted to be here. I'm delighted to talk to you around the work we're doing at National Highways and planning for the future. And I think what's really interesting about the discussion earlier is about collaboration, about integrated planning, about thinking about transport as an enabler for growth, for housing, for improving the quality of life. And actually the other reflection I had from Naomi's is we have a complex ecosystem around transport, and National Highways plays a role in that ecosystem. There's lots of actors, there are lots of partners, there are lots of systems which we need to integrate. And I think transport planning and the work we do at National Highways and the work we're doing with EEH and the work with other partners like Network Rail and Sustrans, we're at a really exciting time for transport planning. We're at a really exciting time of thinking about what we need to do to make sure we provide a high quality network which serves people and places, that deals with externalities, which makes sure we support growth and housing, planned growth and housing, and which integrates. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing, our plans for the future. And I'm also going to talk to you about how you get involved. And I think that's really important. We are at a stage in terms of our planning for the future is and beyond that we need your views. We want your views. We want you to be a collaborator. We want you to integrate with us. And I would say in the last 12 months when Naomi was reflecting, collaboration with EEH has certainly improved. And actually the Oxcam connectivity study was a really great example about how we work with regional and local partners in building the case for transport and having a really more informed view about the case and how it integrates. So I've got some slides which I'll take you through. And they will be made available afterwards. And we'll have a little conversation about the sort of things National Highways is thinking about for the future. We'll also have a bit of a thought about how you get involved in those stages. So I suppose the first slide is thinking about what we need to do. So there's lots of words on there, so I'll take you through it. We've got to remember the role of National Highways and the role of the network, whether it be the M1, the A47, the A5. And we've got to remember that part of our role, set out in the RIS, is to provide safe, reliable, predictable, rapid, long-distance journeys between main centres population. But actually, more importantly, it's about facilitating growth. It's helping people choose where they want to live and work. It's also about access to home, jobs, recreation. And actually, our network is an enabler. It serves a purpose of supporting communities, supporting people and jobs, and supporting you in terms of your aspirations regionally and locally. I do want to say as well that we do need a well-functioning road system. We need a road system that is integrated, and we need a road system that works, and that's really important to us. And we've also got to recognise that our road system does not act in isolation. We're equally as interested in the LRN, that's Local Road Network, and the MRN, as well as those wider proposals being put forward, such as East West Rail, transformational, bus services that we've talked about, active travel, a whole gambit of things we need to think about in terms of how networks connect and how we serve and deliver those purposes. And in terms of RIS3, we've done quite a lot of engagement. Colleagues from SDB have been heavily involved. We've obviously looked at the transport strategies, looked at the emerging plans. We've also considered feedback from colleagues across the country, stakeholders, customers in terms of what they want. And there's a few key things that are sort of shaping our vision. And these are not unique to us as a road operator. These are actually quite common across all of the road networks. So firstly, we have an asset which is valuable, which serves a purpose. And that asset needs to be maintained. It needs to have renewals. And actually, often we get the question of, you get significant volume money, is that all spent on enhancements? Actually, about half of it is spent on renewals, maintenance, operating the network. And that's quite an important context. And that network is aging. A lot of it was built in the 50s and 60s. And if any of you are roads authorities, you will know that the requirements to maintain your network grow year on year. So it's important that we maintain what we've got. It's also important that we address inconsistencies in the network. How do we want to make sure that our network provides end-to-end journeys? We're talking about end-to-end quality. How do we make sure we have end-to-end journeys which meet customer requirements, that are consistent, that capacity is improved in a way which tackles carbon and environment ambitions, which make sure that we address air quality issues, that we address noise issues, that we make sure that we improve connectivity and we connect people and places. And we've got Transport Focus is our customer stakeholder, and they sort of represent customers. And we talk to our customers about what they want. And it's really interesting that they want the basics done properly. So they want safety, journey times, environmental sustainability, and an investment plan which looks at wider priorities. So this point about integration, not just the road building, also about active travel, about freight, about multimodal road facilities. I know Frida's talking later on about road facilities, not plans for those. So we've been having a look at this sort of broad evidence base and thinking about what we want our network to do. So in terms of the network and our emerging priorities, clearly we want to maintain and operate our network and improve that network and operation. And that's really important to us. We want to keep the roads that we've got and the role they play working. And we need to do renewals, resurfacing. We need to make sure the network's safe and serviceable. And actually, we need to make sure the technology works. So, keeping what we've got, maintaining the asset we've got is really important to National Highways. But we also want to make sure that network's safe. And I think one of the statistics I read in terms of delay on the network, about 10% of all delays caused by road collisions and accidents on our network. So safety is really important. And again, it's about optimizing what we've got as much as about enhancements. So how do we make sure our network's safe? We live in Milton Keynes. If the M1's got an accident on it, a serious accident, the traffic has to go on the A5. So how do we make sure we reduce the number of incidents and accidents on the M1? How do we make sure that the A5 doesn't have a lot of traffic diverted? How do we make sure 10% of all delays removed from our network? So safety is really important. We're also really interested in a real priority for this region about how we make sure we support freight and freight facilities and integration. And that integration can include freight facilities, multimodal freight facilities, include lorry parking, include working with industry about improving driver welfare, improving driving standards as well, to make sure that we support that key area of activity. And it's a key activity that we know from the Oxfam study around Northamptonshire. It's a real growth area. And if you drive the network, you'll see lots of logistical hubs coming up around the network, lots of development there. We also want to deliver enhancements. So there are transformational enhancements. So we talked about the A40 and the impact. And if you've driven that road, it is fantastic. But there are other investments we can make. There are investments planned, like the A428, Blackcat-Caxton. There are also investments that we need to think about. But all those investments are not necessarily large-scale investments. Some of them will be about network optimization. So it might be small junction improvements. It might be looking at a corridor like the A5 and thinking about how do we improve safety along the A5. It's not all about transformational. And I think that's quite important in terms of a contextual point about the RIS3. It's building on what we do, but it's also optimizing the network, optimizing the maintenance, optimizing its performance, making use of new technologies, thinking about that digital agenda and autonomous vehicles. And we also need to be broader than that, just future ready. We need to think about rapid charging. So we've got Project Rapid, so that's introducing rapid charging across the network. We've also got how we support autonomous vehicles, which will actually, again, get more of a network through supporting more traffic on the road in terms of reducing the need to build. And we also got designated funds. So designated funds, as you know, are a program of work which talks around active travel, which talks about lorry parking and integration. What I would say in terms of our plans is we're at a really key moment in terms of thinking about where we go next and building on the evidence. So we've got also, sorry, apologies, wrong slide. There's a sort of longer term ambition as well, and that's about how we plan for the future. I think transport investment and thinking about a RIS cycle is a short time. 5 years feels like a long time, but it's a short time in terms of planning for investment. So the other element of work we're doing is looking at our master plan, thinking about those longer term ambitions, thinking about what our network needs to do for 2050. And that builds on the changing dynamics of the network, the changing needs of the network. But actually, we've boiled it down to 3 key areas: safe network, a network which delivers customer experience in terms of the demands placed on it, and a network which is environmentally sustainable, thinks about climate adaptation, thinks about carbon and the challenges around carbon that we need to address, thinks about air quality and noise pollution and water pollution. So we're thinking not only in terms of the next RIS, but we're thinking about 2050. And actually, it's really important we do that because government investment decisions, whilst they are 5 years, government investment takes a long-term view. So access to ports, for example, East-West Rail, for example, how do we connect with those? So in terms of the opportunity for you, We are in a process of gathering evidence, developing our evidence around strategies, but also developing our master plan, our initial report, which sets out how the network currently functions, and the proposals for the next roads period in the roundest sense. And we've also done work around route strategies, which I know many of you will be involved with, looking at the scale and nature of the network and looking at what the network needs are, both in the short, medium, and long term. That will be published hopefully towards the end of this year, and it will then be consulted on. So we have a consultation on our initial report, our route strategies, and then from that, government sets out its roads investment strategy, which we respond to in terms of a strategic plan and a delivery plan in terms of 5-year cycles of funding, so that's 2025 to 2030. So we're in RIS2 now. We had a settlement in 2020 to 2025, so we get our next settlement at 2025. Why it's important to show you this is it is about conversations, it is about collaboration, it is about you playing an active role in those conversations about how National Highways in its role supports what you need from our network, but also how we support EEH's priorities as well, and that's really important to us. And just to tell you where we are at this point, it talks about the public consultation, the decisions in 2023, 2024, and then how we mobilise for our plan in 2024, 2025. The evidence we'll be providing in autumn is really robust. There is a significant amount of data and evidence which supports our decisions. And I suppose the key thing for us moving forward is working with you, building on those strong relationships we have, having good conversations, and making sure we present the best case to government for investment in the round. And that investment in the round is around maintaining what we've got, improving our customer service, making our network safer, making sure we support environmental agendas, making sure we support communities, making sure we deliver the SRN for the people, and we connect places and people. And that is me. Thank you very much.
Right, we're going to put a few questions to Richard in a few moments' time, but let's move rapidly on here from Beth West. Where are you, Beth? Beth